ago, I had the great opportunity to connect with Amy Gensu. She's the author of the new book, The Leader You Want to Be: Five Essential Principles for Bringing Out Your Best Self Every Day. And we had a little mishap along the way. The technology gods weren't smiling on me. We had a disconnect during the interview. And then lo and behold, I actually forgot to properly hit the record button for what I'm sure was one of the most brilliant interviews ever. And I can't tell you how fortunate I am and how thankful I am, Amy, to get you back here today for round two of our interview.
Art, thanks so much for having me back.
So I had asked a little bit in the pre-talk. You're getting set. If people are listening to this, the book is launching, October 22nd, 2019?
Yes. October 22nd is publication date. Yep.
All right. So how much fun are you having on the book launch tour?
I have to tell you, this part is really fun, right? You spend 2 years working on a manuscript, pouring your heart and soul into a book, and now it's coming to the world. And so getting the chance to be out and talking to folks about it is really terrific.
Yeah, what a great kind of jumping in point, because it does take an incredible amount of personal effort, psychic effort, whatever you want to term it, to generate a book. I'll go on the record and I don't say this to a lot of authors. Often I just ask questions. As a reformed corporate executive and senior leader, and now an active executive and emerging leader coach, I love this book. I think it's really important, and I really, feel that it was important to you. But maybe a good place to start is, where did it come from?
I think this book's been brewing in me for a long time, Art. Honestly, 20 years ago, when I was in corporate America working as a management consultant, I was definitely like a square peg in a round hole, if you will, working 80, 90 hours a week, and definitely not the leader I wanted to be and not feeling my best self. And to be honest, 20 years ago, at that point, I crashed and burned, and I ended up with chronic back and neck pain. And I think it was that moment in time where a seed got planted that there just must be a different way to have work that fulfills us, to do what we're meant to do, and not do it at the sacrifice of our health, our family, or the things that are important to us.
So is that kind of the burning issue underlying this, is to help others who are dealing with similar types of stressors in their lives navigate more effectively?
I do think there is an underlying theme there where as a coach, and I wonder if you're seeing this too, I feel like in the last 5 years, almost every leader who's come to myself or our firm, there's been some dimension of, wow, the world around me, the outer game just changed, or the outer game just got bigger or more complex. And how do I navigate that? And how do I reinvent myself each time the game changes? And so my hope is the book does that.
I have to ask, is that a function of the times that we're in, or just the natural issues of someone leveling up in their careers?
That's a great question. And I wonder actually, Art, if that's just a juxtaposition, right? So I do think it's a function of, as one levels up, that outer game grows. And are you keeping up and reinventing and resetting yourself? But I think with technology and the economy downturn back in 2008, something definitely felt like it shifted, where people are talking more about 24/7 and disruption and change happening at a different clip.
So, and obviously it's a common theme in a lot of the business writings and leadership writings out there. I come out of the software world and tech world, and in my mind, it always moved fast.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, my children are now in the workforce, grown adults, doing fabulously, but I'm wondering if they kind of just accept this speed and this pace as it is what it is. It's what they know. Whereas people such as myself, who've been around the block a few times, translation, I'm older. If we've noticed the change over time, what's your thought on that?
That's such a great question. I do think the generation of today, those who grew up with technology, where smartphones and iPhones were just a part of your life and world, probably have moved at a different clip. I know my son's 14 and just starting high school. And, technology, he's known technology since he was a kid, and he moves fast and he has a different structure. And, I'm a kid who kind of, I'm almost 50 now. And so I can remember my childhood was much more, it felt more lazy. It felt more like, we rode our bikes around the neighborhood. So I don't know if it's a function of age where perhaps I just, feel the difference in speed more poignantly for sure.
Nonetheless, I think there's some credence to it. I suspect you hear it, and I hear it from executives, especially CEO clients, who are really stressing with the pace of change. What worked yesterday no longer hunts. Strategies are, obsolete quickly. Product cycles are shrinking dramatically. I think that those are creating many of the stressors. So I have no doubt that there's an element of truth to that change. I love the way you describe it. It's a period of ferocity and velocity. How poetic! That is fabulous. I'm going to quote you.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I may have actually heard that from a client and grabbed those words because it just felt so true to life, right? Like the velocity and ferocity, they're great words.
It does, and I have to. I'm going to read a quote from the book. It actually is attributed to a colleague of yours, to Betty Hung,
Mm.
and I love this. It so describes the challenge that I see with every individual in their career striving to level up, to get to that next level, to navigate the new set of challenges. Betty says, when you get promoted to new and bigger roles with new and greater responsibilities, you have to reinvent yourself over and over and accelerate your velocity, pace, and effectiveness. The curve gets exponentially steeper in terms of velocity, pace, and expectations. It's not linear. But how can you keep improving and growing at the same rate? Isn't that the challenge? And just please tell Betty, I love that. What a brilliant
Yes,
quote.
I will. I will. She is one of the most senior women in the private equity industry, and so sits on boards of some of the top software companies, in the world. And so I just thought when I was having a conversation with her once, when she described that, I said, "Oh my goodness, Betty, I need to quote that in this book because you said it better than I possibly could have." But I feel like she did capture, this idea of constant reinvention and disruption of self.
Yeah, it's, I often in my own writing draw parallels to the world of video gaming.
Mm.
Something I've learned as not a gamer, but as a financier of gaming platforms for my children over the years, is that this need to level up is, everything you learned on the last level, maybe really doesn't work on the new level because it's all changed. The adversaries are different. The dynamics are different. What you need to do is different. So I think Betty does a wonderful job describing that. And that really brings us to your book. So
Mhm.
I think it's somewhere in there, describe it as a blending of Western management practices and Eastern philosophy. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, the search for self actualization and mastery and who's our best self and what's our most effective self has been written about for thousands of years,
Sure.
right? And
Mhm.
so my own hope was to say, how do I draw on the best of kind of Western thinking, kind of where I grew up? I went to Harvard Business School, some of the great research coming out of institutions like that. And at the same time, I was raised in an Asian culture. My parents were immigrants. And so, issues that we hear a lot more today around mindfulness and around contemplation and around some of the softer skills, if you will, have been long embedded in the way I was raised. And so I just thought it'd be great to be able to thread both of those things into the book to
Oh,
bring a full view.
it really does work. It adds, and I'm not sure what the right term is, just an extra level of depth or another dimension to the writing. So you start out introducing the two modes of a leader, leader A and
Mm.
leader B. Um, what describe the modes? What are they?
Sure. I think within all of us, and I know I feel this every day as a leader myself, the leader A mode, right, is those moments when we feel like we're holding a broad perspective. And no matter what the situation brings, somehow we don't resist it. We lean into it, even if it's difficult or complex or challenging. And you kind of come out of that moment or that situation and you say, wow, I rode that wave with just a little more ease and effectiveness and resilience. And leader B mode, which we're all familiar with, and I spend a fair amount of my own life there, is the opposite, where the world feels a little myopic, our perspective and lens feels a little more cloudy or narrow, and the wave just feels a lot harder, and it feels like we're, swimming against the tide and resisting the moment and not able to really meet the moment and the situation with the effectiveness that perhaps we intended to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's even kind. When we're in leader B mode and we're humans, we're just not, we're so far away from ourselves at our best.
Yes.
And everybody knows it. I mean, it has this ripple effect across the organization. I think it's responsible for a lot of what we see in terms of disengagement and just dysfunction across organizations.
Absolutely. And I think even the heuristic of A and B emerged out of conversations with folks in coaching meetings where I realized, wow, we're debriefing those A moments and those times you felt like you were your best self, and what were the conditions and mindsets and behaviors and actions that you took.
Mm.
And at the same time, a good part of the coaching meetings sometimes with folks are around those B moments and B mode where they say, wow, I kind of regret how I showed up to the team today, or I didn't love what I heard in my 360 about the negative impact I'm having on people.
By the way, did I thank you for not going all leader B on me when I sent the note to you indicating that the podcast didn't work or the video cast recording didn't take? So thank you.
Oh yeah, no, I had to catch myself there. No, just kidding.
I mean, one of the things that I notice when I engage with individuals, I ask a question at some point in the narrative of think of situations when you've been yourself at your best, whether they're professionally or personally. What was your role? What were you doing? What were the circumstances? What were the conditions? And what I'm consistently disappointed in is how hard it is for people to think of those moments. I don't know if you encounter that at all as well, but I hear it over and over again.
I do think it's so interesting, right? I think most of us, especially those folks who are successful and hardworking and drive themselves hard, uh, struggle with taking a victory lap and to pause and reflect on, wait a minute, what was I doing 2 days ago? And what was really good about that day? And what was I proud of? And who was I being when I was at my best self? So I think, again, we're moving so fast. Oftentimes we finish a to do and we're on to the next one, that the pause to reflect on what really worked well and why, and what were the conditions that drove that, aren't questions that we often ask ourselves, but we should.
Yeah, I agree. I often wonder as well if it's a function of the environments that. So, in cases where I'm dealing with people below the top level of the organization, and I run through that scenario and don't hear a lot of responses, you begin to wonder what it is the top leadership is doing wrong that's creating this environment where people can't be at their best, where they aren't regularly moving into, what's termed discovery mode, maybe Carol Dweck, not sure if I'm attributing that right, but into that mode where you're more leader A and leader B. So can you build a leader A type environment, I suppose is my question, an environment where people are challenged and encouraged to move into that mode?
Yeah. Art, honestly, in my wildest dreams, that's what I most hope, right?
Uh,
That the leaders out there, perhaps listening to this podcast, really think about that. What is so great about being a leader is you actually have the choice and agency to make a difference at a cultural level, right? And the leaders that I've worked with who have taken this on and gotten really serious about being their best leader A self and wanting to build leader A teams, have just made small pivots. One guy that I worked with at the beginning of every team meeting with his direct reports, he had everyone go around the room and say, what's one thing you're proud of from this last 2 weeks for you and your team?
I love
And it
that.
wasn't just a feel good exercise. What ended up happening, and I came to observe one day, because he said, you need to see the difference in tone that one question sets. So not only did it change the tone for the team, they were more informed. So in a classic siloed world, suddenly sub-functions were aware of what other groups were doing in this extremely positive way.
I love that. What a great technique. What a great tip for everybody listening to this. Take that idea and just go far and wide with it, please. So I'm reading again from the book. You describe when we are consistently in leader A mode, we have a sense of our purpose and impact. We're especially effective and we experience the growth that comes from learning and challenge. I want to be there all of the time in this sense of purpose and impact,
Yes.
which I know is, a theme throughout the book there. How do we find it? How do we find it? Because I don't know that a lot of people are operating with that sense.
Purpose is such a tricky thing, right? Art, where we hear it, we all like the word, we want to have that feeling, and yet it's a little squishy. It's I'm so busy anyway and have so much to do. How can I just pause and think about purpose? So one of the things that I hope the book does is on the chapter on purpose, I break it down into a more concrete algorithm, if you will, where purpose is a function of both your contribution and your passion. So at every moment, if you can track to, in my current role, or perhaps the next role that I'm seeking, what is that difference and highest value add that I hope to make? If I were to publish 3 headlines at the end of the year about my year in terms of what myself and my
Right.
team accomplished, what would that be? And on the learning side, hey, what inspired you a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago is certainly not the same as what might be inspiring you today. So staying connected to, as I come out of projects and real-time initiatives in the workplace, what were the things that jazzed me? What did I enjoy about that project? What part of that was my unique value add? Really critical to stay connected to that.
And I think you created, you mentioned, you reduced it to an algorithm, a nice little mathematical formula, right? If I
Yeah.
recall, purpose equals
Passion plus contribution.
passion plus contribution. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost slipped on that. And then I chuckled when I saw the consultant and you come out in the standard 4-box matrix. Okay, I've never met a consultant who didn't use one of those in their book, but it works. It works.
Yeah, I think the training of the past still stays with you, right? Where I still walk through the world seeing 2x2s.
Yeah. So I think that one of the challenges my clients face, and I suspect yours, every day in organizational life, it's kind of a combination of fire drills,
Mhm.
urgent issues, urgent, unimportant, but still urgent. I've learned as long ago as a leader that the job of leading would be easy if it weren't for the people. But of course, people are what we have to work with. So we have the people issues, the transact. How do we develop this sense? Where does somebody go? I mean, they're going to pick up your book, they're going to look at your book, and we'll talk about the 5 Ps. But what do they start doing in order to get control of themselves and the situation?
I think the first step is just to remember that we do have choice and control.
Hmm.
So I think, again, the external environment can pull on us in a way where it feels like we've left the driver's seat. So my hope is in picking up the book, it's a step to say, wait a minute, I'm the author of my own life. I'm the leader of my own life. Let me step back into the driver's seat here for a moment. And then my hope is the book offers practical, tactical ways to then take back that control in terms of how you prioritize, how you lead your team, even down to, you know, it's so tempting to let the fire drill or the emails be the first things that we attend to. So it takes a little bit of discipline to say, wait a minute, yes, those are other people's emergencies, but for the business, are they truly my highest and best use at this moment?
Well said. I'm thinking of a client I encountered. It was a multi-day workshop program, and I would drive in the morning and park in their garage. And I noticed one of the participants was in her car and just kind of sitting there quietly. And after a couple of days, I asked a question that was probably really awkward, but like, what is it that you're doing? And she goes, I'm preparing myself to succeed today. I'm preparing
Wow.
my attitude. I love that. So
Yes, I love
she was kind of setting the prep, saying, look, there's going to be all sorts of noise. I have to push out the fact that the dog ate the kids' homework this morning,
that.
that my husband told me he got a traffic ticket on the way to work, and I have to find a way to go in and succeed at every encounter. And she was remarkably effective, and no surprise, a fast rising star there. But preparing your attitude, I just love that.
I love that, right? And in fact, I bet she maybe sat in that car for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? So oftentimes I'll say to the folks I work with, just block those first 15 minutes of the day for yourself to get centered, anchored, and really think about, what am I going to move forward today? That's critical.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, and I agree with you. It only does take 10 or 15 minutes to kind of just center yourself and change the entire dynamic for the day.
Yes.
So you describe, the doorway to leader A, and that's where we all want to get to leader A mode, where we're being used at our highest and best. We're feeling sense of purpose. We're feeling, that we're contributing. We love the challenge. The doorway comes through your 5 Ps. Let's break those down a little bit.
The 5 Ps, are as I looked across 20 years of coaching programs and said, what have been the most common themes? These 5 buckets and areas kept emerging. And so they are purpose and the action to reset your compass,
Mm-hmm.
uh, process to make sure you're rebooting your personal operating system along the way, people, where as the game grows, raising your game means you're raising the game of others, hopefully, presence in terms of not scratching the itch, and then peace. And that's really around loosening the grip that we hold on ourselves.
I love that last. I love all of them, but the last one, what a great way to wrap it off, wrap it up. What with respect to process, unpack that one a little bit. That may be one of the more ones that I kind of mentally wrestled with as I went through it.
Process is one of those things, right? Number one, it depends on your own love-hate relationship with process. So
Mhm.
some folks are sticklers for process and structure. They may read that chapter and say, oh, right, I do all of this anyway, naturally. And some of us feel like process and structure feels like a cage. And so the question really becomes, how do I have enough process and structure so that I can feel freedom? I can protect my time and energy so that things that are repeatable actually become scalable. So process actually becomes important as you level up, as the role gets bigger or the organization grows. That's a lever that one has to look at in terms of effectiveness.
That particular one may be the most relevant for me in my own work, and I feel that stress. I feel like I'm in a prison if I don't have control over that particular aspect. So then presence. You talked about scratching that itch. What does that mean?
I think there are so many things every day where we all know that it's not good for us or that we shouldn't engage that way.
Hmm.
And sometimes, I find myself saying, or I have clients say to me, I kind of just couldn't help myself. Like I've gotten 360 feedback for years that I should be, for example, let's say someone says I should be more patient. And yet you still went into the meeting and bit somebody's head off. Or in my case, I for years have tried to give up sugar. And I think I offer this example in the book. And, will consciously, with full self awareness, watch myself open the candy bar wrapper and still eat it. And so I think there's a dimension of leadership that is around self awareness, self regulation, where habit and what is comfortable for us is not always the best answer for the business. And so, as leaders learn to slow down and find the pause where they're not just scratching the itch, I think better decisions ultimately get made.
I love the thinking. Dig deeper. How do we do a better job? How do you keep yourself from either biting that person's head off or biting the candy bar?
It's not a perfect batting average. So, but I think the first step again is awareness. We all have a certain Achilles heel. For the leaders listening today, for yourself, for myself, there's probably been some edge or development edge or feedback you've been given for a long time that keeps showing up in its own form. So,
Mhm.
number one, know what that Achilles heel is for you. And then, number two, with that awareness, how do you proactively set up process or preparation that makes it potentially easier not to scratch that itch? And then what can you do in the moment, which is much harder in terms of knowing your own cues so that you can find that pause and regulate?
Still a work in process on that one.
Yes.
I suspect
I
we
think
all
these
are.
are lifelong journeys.
I agree. I'm now feeling somewhat guilty about the Reese's peanut butter cup that I opened last night because I have a sugar issue as well. So,
Yeah.
and you know what? I can't blame my wife. She brought it in the house, but I'm the one who opened it up and ate it. So,
Right.
mm,
And certainly there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think there's some mindfulness towards, hey, I happen to know that sugar doesn't bring out my best self.
right.
It hurts the clarity of my thinking. And so I'm at least more aware, especially for high stakes moments when I have to present, perhaps I have an important meeting, to just ease off of that.
Yeah, and that's where I see this one a lot is individuals. In fact, many of my clients have come to me, and one of the core issues they want to work on is when I'm under stress, when I feel like I'm under attack in a high stakes meeting or presentation, when I'm being questioned by, the executive, a board member, whatever, I'm not at my best.
Mhm.
Some have that fight mode, others have the flight mode. And in one individual's case, he was so fearful of ever encountering an executive in an elevator that he started in his multi-level office complex taking the stairs. Well,
Wow.
he lost 10 pounds in the process. We needed to get him back and comfortable with it. And it was that issue of finding a way to deal with that his instinct to run, to flee out of that
Right.
setting. And I think that goes to your presence component there.
Absolutely. And I really applaud your client there for the vulnerability to get clear on that's what's happening, right? To first break down the pattern that in that type of situation, this is what emerges for me. This is how I typically respond. So now I can create a new set of responses that will help me sort of be more effective in those moments.
Right, absolutely. So I have a question, and that is, how can the people around us help us do a better job in leader A mode? How can we draw upon the support and coaching of our team members, our colleagues, or our manager here?
People are such a critical part of life in general, and the interdependencies and connections today make it even more critical. So I think number one, for all of us who pride ourselves on being self-reliant, just remember how critical your network of support can be. And so I think it's worth looking at, who are the folks that I work with, who are my support people.
Mhm.
And in the book, I name 5 roles to pay attention to. So I think every leader should have, whether it's embodied in one person or across multiple people, who are the experts? Even if you're an expert in your own right, who are the other experts to reach out to get to know, to have as support so that you're always learning new things? Who are the sausage makers where if you do need to present to executives and you want to be buttoned up, who are those people you can practice with, who you can hear yourself roll something off your tongue and see if it works? Who are the helicopters that bring you an aerial view and a great perspective that perhaps you wouldn't have otherwise? And then 2 of my favorites are, who are the cheerleaders and safe harbors for when you've had a great week or you've had a bad week, who can give you the atta girl, atta boy that just really helps keep you motivated.
Right, right. I love that. I kind of use the concept that I borrowed from the Navy SEALs of having a swim buddy. We all need
Yes.
multiple swim buddies that can give us that, at least to their minds, the objective, honest appraisal of it was great and here's why. You weren't at your best. Here's why. Here's what could happen. Here was the impact, and so forth. So, yeah, and we can't do it, and that requires a certain level of vulnerability on the individual striving to get to leader A mode. Not everyone's comfortable showing that vulnerability. What's your counsel for those individuals that want to get better, but they're uncomfortable showing that to others that, hey, I'm imperfect and I want to strive to get better and I need your help.
It can be daunting to think, wow, I'm going to put myself out there,
Right.
make a clear request, ask for help. So I think well said that it does require a certain amount of vulnerability and courage. But I think, again, there's a certain point where our own individual effectiveness is just inherently capped by time, right? So even if you are the biggest rock star quarterback in the world and you're just driving that ball, you still ultimately are going to need a team to do more and achieve more. And so the sooner you get comfortable with letting go of control and asking for help, the more likely you are to achieve bigger and better things.
So one of the things that I've done, and I'd love your feedback on this, is when I think about your book,
Mm,
I've mentally imposed after the word leader in the leader you want to be, the word person.
mm,
I think this it's for a broader audience, and not, we tend to quickly assume and ascribe leadership to those people at the top levels of organizations with vast resources and large budgets and so forth. But leaders can be individual contributors at their own level as well. And I'm going to nudge you a little bit and say this book is really good for a lot more than those people that play formal leadership roles. What do you think?
I really appreciate that, Art. I mean, as you were just saying that, my heart kind of softened and smiled that the thought of all of us, I hope for anyone who reads this or listening to this, ultimately, who's the person you want to be? And I think, you could, even though the book starts with leader A and leader B, we could easily all change that first word to the parent you want to be, the colleague you want to be, the friend you want to be, the daughter or son you want to be. And really being our best self is not only for our own lives, but in the way we touch so many others.
No doubt about it. So why'd you choose the label leader?
I think, in this case, that might be a function of who I work with most closely each day.
Okay.
And so, as I was drawing on field research and being out in the trenches, that was what was most salient. But I think in my heart, as I was writing, and even there's a lot of allusions to parenting and other stories that aren't work related. Uh, you can kind of feel the bleed over into just a more general work life equation that puts us at our best.
Yeah, so I'm going to inform you now. I'm going to promote this book to individuals above and beyond those that are the formalized leaders. I think it's valuable for all of us. So, and I love to hear your, I'm thrilled to hear your thoughts on that. So, all right. So we pick up the book, we go through it. I got excited about the ideas and the opportunities and the framework. I think it was manageable, and the philosophy that was included. Just so much resonated with me. How do you advise people to get started?
There's a lot in there, right? So when you
Yeah.
sit down to write, it's definitely been a synthesis of many, folks' lives that I've had the good honor to ride alongside with. I'd say in starting, one might just start with the table of contents and say, wow, which principle of the five
Mhm.
principles most speaks to me now? So as you mentioned, Art, process, there could be something there for me. I
Right.
would say, the principles can be read independently,
Mhm.
even though there's an interdependence among them. So I say start with what resonates.
I mean, you could build a coaching framework or a self-development framework off of the content, and the content has legs, and it's so well presented. So yeah, I'm a
Thanks.
fan. If everybody's listening, I am genuinely a fan, and you won't hear that about books I don't particularly care for, and I read a lot of books. So this is special, and I suspect and you've kind of hinted at that. I suspect it's autobiographical in nature as well.
Absolutely. In some ways, readers are getting kind of a glimpse into my own journal. um, as I mentioned, I have a son who's 14 starting high school. So I face the same tensions and struggles I think of other folks who work, who are building families. I have aging parents. I'm the first to admit I don't have it all figured out. And I honestly feel the teeter totter of A and B every day. And, as much in learning mode as trying to share what I'm observing.
So as a writer, do you learn while you write?
Absolutely. I think this book for me in particular was a huge integrating moment for myself to pause to say, what am I learning as a coach? What am I seeing and observing for others? But really truthfully, Art, there was a lot in here that was around what have I been up to? What am I
Right.
learning? And what's next for me?
It is. It's so fascinating. Um, I certainly don't have your pedigree with the writing, but I do write a good deal for leadership and management and career and self development. And oftentimes, I find myself using the writing as a vehicle to unpack ideas and reflect upon my own experiences, and also identify what it is that I would do better and differently. I mean, it's a powerful learning experience for me every time I write.
Absolutely. I feel like that resonates with what the experience felt like.
So, last question: what did you learn about yourself writing the book?
Oh, wow. I think as I wrote the book, probably when readers read those last two chapters, the big question for me right now is around peace within myself.
Hmm.
What does it mean to help others discover that peace?
Hmm.
And to be perfectly honest, I think when I was writing that chapter, it was more intellectual. And even now that it's months later, I'm really beginning to experiment with what's it mean to really feel that. So I think it was a good learning vehicle around where I am in my own development.
Fabulous. What a great place to wrap things up. Amy, thank you so much. For everybody's listening, where you can find the book will be located in the show notes here. And we wish you, Amy, nothing but success and health and happiness on your journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Art. I really appreciate it.